We're doing this joint Substack with Ota. I am super excited that you decided to join. Héctor, I know it's entiendo, but le estamos echando con ganas, ¿no? Y bueno, what we wanted to first for you to introduce yourself, the work that mi familia around the country.
Yeah, muchas gracias por la invitación a Latino Victory and you, Catherine. I had the pleasure of working with Latino Victory since the very inception of the organization, an important space and an important organization to create political power. I'm Héctor Sánchez Barba, President and CEO of Mi Familia Vota. Mi Familia Vota is a national organization working on empowering the Latino community, creating civic participation. We are the organization that is on the ground working with the communities, doing citizenship, voter registration, GOTV, voter education. But the most important part is to create political empowerment to advance the issues that are a priority for our community, particularly at a time when we're facing so many attacks. It's very important to make sure that we have the political power to fight back extremism, but more importantly, to protect our families and advance our political issues and policy issues.
And there's a lot of getting. Okay, we have probably short of get this election right in the midterm. On AI and how we Latinos using. But first, tell me, be active in the 2024 as it relates to the Latino community or politics in general. That's
Yeah, it's important to start from that analysis, Catherine, because the Latino vote has been under attack. And I think everybody in a lot of different spaces is blaming the Latino community for what happened in this election. And we need to be careful about that. We need to be very strategic and we need to be careful about how we analyze the result of this election. We really need to look at the root causes of how we got to this point. And we need to be more sophisticated in our analysis. The Latino vote is always blamed, regardless of the results, for what happened. Every interview that I did in 2020, after we defeated the extremism of Donald Trump, every question that I got was, what happened with Latinos in Miami and what happened with Latinos in the border in Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley? Instead of saying, and this should have been the main headline after 2020 election, it should have been minorities defeat extremism. Because every group in the nation of minorities voted to get Trump out of office. The only group in the nation that voted to continue with Donald Trump was the white vote, almost at 60% in 2016 and 2020 and in 2024. There are no stories about that. Again, it's not a blaming space. It's just about really understanding how the political process works, how we define elections, how we invest in communities. And we know that when we invest in the Latino community, Latinos turn out to vote in policy issues that are aligned with our community, that tend to be progressive. We don't welcome extremism. We don't embrace extremism as a community. But
many of us have fled our countries fleeing extremism in itself. So as it is, it's something that's very, very important to us.
And there is one element to talk that we must discuss from a more honest place is, for example, what happened with Latino men. I hear a lot of interviews, and most people are not really analyzing some of the core values and core situations that Latino men are facing. For the last 30 years, the minimum wage has been stagnated in the nations. Latinos are overrepresented in minimum wage jobs. That has been a national fight, yet we haven't seen an increase in the minimum wage in almost 3 decades. 3 decades, Catherine, that the minimum wage has been less than $10. People cannot live with that money. And we can go over issues by issues. Latinos have the highest levels of death and injuries at work. Latinas have the highest levels of wage debt. Latinos are facing various issues with access to healthcare, housing. So we can go over all of the different issues and economic problems. And that's where we need to see how we connect that to real movement on policy issues from both sides. Now, when you add the element of very serious misinformation, manipulation of technology actually to misinform and scare people, we were the main community that was targeted with misinformation and disinformation, particularly in Spanish. So when we combine all of these issues, I think it's a better analysis to understand where we are, but we need to look at the opportunities too.
No, absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities as we approach the midterms and the fight to win back the White House. But you mentioned some points around workers and workers' rights. And today we're sitting at the offices of the New York City Central Labor Council. So we know that labor will play an important role in the work that we need to do moving forward. So is there anything that you want to share in terms of the role that labor has played so far and how we can collaborate and work together in order to defeat this kind of extremism?
Yeah, I spent more than a decade inside the labor movement. I was the executive director of LACLA, kind of the organization that represents Latino and immigrant workers. And the labor movement is so important for the past, present, and future of the nation to have a healthy democracy. It's the most important movement. Labor councils over the nations, AFLs, unions, the most important movement representing workers. And we need to make sure that the labor movement is always present in the Latino and immigrant community. It's good to see when labor stands up for immigrant rights, for immigrant workers that are the most exploited workers in the nation, but also to make sure that the benefits of unionization, the benefits of a contract, are also extended to the Latino community. Again, I mentioned that we are the most vulnerable workers in the nation, particularly immigrant workers. So unionization in the Latino community is a perfect match to make sure that we have better economic benefits for the economy, but more access to the middle class. So it's part also of fighting back on the issue of heavy concentration of wealth and just exploitation of workers, but also, and this is important for you, Latino Victory, and for us in Mi Familia Bota, labor has been historically a central space building political power and fighting extremism. So that's something we need to continue exploring to build political power and to use that political power to defeat the extremism. It's very dangerous what we're seeing right now. The main line of attack are immigrants, Latinos, but also the labor movement.
Absolutely. And workers in general. And we saw what the MAGA Republicans in Congress did with the big ugly bill in terms of the transfer of wealth really from working people to the richest folks in America who are going to benefit from a huge tax cut basically on the backs of workers and specifically immigrants. And when folks think about Latinos, the immigration conversation is very much in the forefront. So, what are your thoughts in terms of the polling and on the issues that matter to our communities and how immigration has interspersed itself into that conversation? Because at the end of the day, we know that it's not just about the working tactics that we use in campaigns, but really also about the messaging. How are we going to connect with those disaffected workers and those disaffected voters that perhaps we're going to need to gain back before the next election?
Yeah, and it's
Your
very
thoughts on that?
important to look at it from the political point of view and the contributions of immigrants. Let me start by saying that it's unacceptable how the MAGA movement has manipulated the anti-immigrant messaging. It has been at the center of the campaign, like we have never seen before. There has been always an anti-immigrant extremist movement, white supremacists, etc., that it keeps growing. But what we saw in this election to put immigrants at the center of the campaign from a negative point of view, we saw in the different spaces, actually in the convention of the Republicans, some of the main signs in the convention were mass deportations. That was the soul of this campaign, the soul of this party, the soul of this extremist movement. And it's really affecting the nation and the quality of life, not only of immigrants, but everybody that looks Mexican. Remember that Donald Trump started attacking Mexicans. Anybody that looks that he doesn't belong here, anybody with an accent like our accents, Qatari, it can be regional accent from the United States. But everybody that doesn't mean the stereotypes of who belongs into the nation. We have seen a drastic increase of uh, um, uh, hate crimes against the communities, but it's at the center of this party, and they're using that to create policies of extremism. Um, we need to make sure that we fight back on those issues because immigrants tend to have, for example, the lowest levels in the nation of any group on crime. But if an immigrant commits a crime, which happens in every community, it's going to be 24 hours on TV. And it's hard to fight that messaging. Immigrants, undocumented immigrants pay taxes and contribute to Social Security, contribute to many different spaces that undocumented immigrants don't have access to. And immigrants open more small businesses. Immigrants are fueling the economy of the nation. Undocumented immigrants saved this nation during COVID. While most of us were working from our offices, undocumented immigrants were on the front lines dying to keep this economy going. And it's unacceptable that these people, these extremist voices, are taking it against on immigrants. But we need to take a proactive approach. They're going to take everything away from us, and it's very clear. This administration is trying to take even citizenship away from people like us. I waited and went through the process for more than 2 decades, Catherine. It's a very painful process to become a citizen in the nation. And even if you follow the process, they make it extremely difficult. And now they want to take citizenship away. They're coming after dreamers. They're coming after green card holders. What they're doing to families and children that are undocumented is unacceptable when they contribute so much and our economy depends so much on immigrants. So we need to turn this into a political space and a political opportunities. As I told you this morning when we were having breakfast, um, we are in the process of launching a massive campaign on citizenship. Citizenship is at the soul, is at the heart of democracy. There is nothing that says democracy better than becoming a citizen, than being part of the democratic process, than being part of contributing to these spaces. And we want to create a massive campaign on citizenship in the nation from the democracy point of view, from the civic participation point of view, but also to protect your families. These people, these right wingers are coming after every immigrant in the nation, regardless if you're undocumented, if you are a green card holder, or if you're a citizen.
Absolutely. And I've said in this space before about my experience becoming a US citizen after having immigrated as a teen with my parents. It wasn't my decision, but of course, becoming an American citizen is probably one of the things that I'm most proud of, as I have made this country my home. That's where I've raised my children, and I take that citizenship very seriously. And that's the thing about naturalized citizens. We hold that citizenship dear because it wasn't something that was granted to us. It was something that we earned. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And certainly I support your campaign to get more and more Latinos to become US citizens, to exert their rights, but also to protect their families. And so I know that there's a new initiative that Mi Familia Vota has launched to use the power of culturally intelligent AI as it relates not just to organizing campaigns, but also politically. And the fact is that this is the same type of technology that has been used against us in the past, right? So it's important for us to be on the same page. It's a technology that moves constantly. So tell me about your process of how you got here, how the technology works, and what you expect to do with it this next cycle.
This is very, very exciting. You can see me smile because it's meeting the moment and meeting the present and the future. And the main question that we posed in Mi Familia Bota 4 years ago, when we had my amazing colleague, Denise Cook, who's the head of the department, who is behind a lot of these amazing ideas, who has a lot of expertise at the top level creating this kind of technology and tools. And the points of reflection that we had together and at Mi Familia Bota is how do we use the highest, most innovative technology in the nation to make the democracy more accessible to Latino community and to immigrants, to the immigrant community. Historically, Catherine, we have been always the most underrepresented when it comes to access to technology in the community. We're always the last one, either because of a structural exclusion or because there are not a lot of elements of education, communication, and access to technology or the best technology for our community to advance. So Mi Familia Bota decided to use the most important tools and evolution of technology like artificial intelligence and to use all that creativity to put it at the service of the community to have access to civic participation, better access, and to have access to democracy. But it's also important to understand that as a community, we're facing some of the biggest problems of exclusion of democracy. We talk about some of the problems in the election. A lot of people don't mention that we are the community that is the most underfunded on anything related to democracy and civic participation. The group that is the most underfunded at a time when there is a direct correlation between elections and money. The second one is a voter suppression, making it harder for our community to participate in the democratic process. And we can spend 2 hours talking about voter suppression. It's just anything that intimidates or makes it harder for a community to participate in the process. And we are the community that has been under the attack from that perspective. And something that is very important to understand misinformation and disinformation. So in all of these dreams and practice that we've been doing for more than 3 years on this area, we decided to use that technology in the department to develop the tools, to do the data. We are the Latino organization that has the largest field infrastructure in civic participation. So we're constantly feeding the information that we get on the ground, on the doors, at the mercados, with the community, to the kind of technology that we need. So we have been in the process of developing all these tools, for example, to find misinformation in real time, to really understand in the communities when we see the WhatsApps or the social media or the elements of misinformation in campaigns that are telling our communities lies or conspiracy theories, etc., to try to get to those elements immediately and fight back with real education. The second one is using, and there are a number of tools, and I invite everybody to check out our amazing report that really shows how we're going to be using this tool. But another example is just helping people with the best technology and artificial intelligence and with tools. Most people in our community use artificial intelligence today, and it's so amazing. So amazing when we use it for good, but it can be used for bad too, like misinformation, disinformation, and
Absolutely.
other things. So, for example, we're going to help people in the processes of all the campaigns that we do with voter registration. It's the voter education that is so important, Catherine, from a no-partisan point of view, just from uh, uh, the priorities for the community. Another one is we want to help with citizenship, for example. Um, in all of this process, use technology. Sometimes the process is very bureaucratic and long. Use all of this technology to help citizens, legal permanent residents in the process of becoming citizens. Another element is focuses on youth. Sometimes the young Latinos that are the present and the future of the nation and democracy need particular tools. They're the ones that use this technology the most to get access. And another one that is very important is rural areas. Rural areas historically have been excluded from access to civic participation. So we want to focus on that.
I appreciate that. And I know that as a partner organization, we're going to be collaborating on a lot of these activities because it really is important. And as it relates to the misinformation piece, it's not just about addressing misinformation and disinformation in the moment, but also consistently, because I think that's the challenge that we've seen, right? And we saw it in the last election, which is really that it just keeps coming, right? The misinformation just keeps coming. So we have to stay up on it. This is the moment where we don't take our foot off the gas pedal. And so I'm excited to be working with you as a partner in this project. You mentioned rural areas, and I think it's important to note that some of the folks in rural areas are going to be the most impacted, especially as it relates to healthcare and what we're seeing with community health centers, um, and what can happen as a result of the big ugly bill and changes to Medicaid and Medicare. Um, can you expand a little bit more on that and the rural project?
Yeah, no, it's important. I think at the center of this, Catherine, is that sometimes because of the rural areas, there are more elements of exclusion and structural problems to access to information and democracy. There was a big discussion on access to broadband that we had a couple of years ago, and we advocated to more access to broadband as an investment to make sure that we're working on these different issues. So the goal of these tools is to, first of all, understand the community that we're serving. A lot of times, the technology that is being developed and implemented comes from other spaces that never had access to our communities, that understand our community, that understand our immigrant experience, that speaks in Spanish in our language, in Dominican in your case, or in Mexicano in mine. Um, but technology evolves, especially at this moment, is growing so fast. Just think about the first time you had a cell and what you could do with a cell and what we can do with a cell right now. Now, put artificial intelligence on top of that, and technology is just exploiting in our humanity. But we need to ask questions about how we use this technology for good. And that's a little bit of the point on the rural areas. How do we get these culturally understanding uh, tools? For example, farm workers. Farm workers are mostly Latinos. We need to make sure that they get access to all the information, all the technology, all the elements for to register to vote, to become a citizen. And where is your polling place? Rural areas always have uh, problems of how far do you have to go to have access to voting, Catherine. So fighting a lot of this with technology plus connected to the field infrastructures that we have and to the traditional organizing. It's very important for us to focus on traditional organizing, the person to person. We have all of our leaders are part of the communities where we are in the states where we are. So that's very important. So this is an important addition to everything that we do in the old school of organizing, which is the best organizing that still works.
I agree 100%. And, one of the aspects I love about speaking with you on this platform is because Mi Familia Vota and Latino Victory all operate within different entities, the C3, a C4, and a PAC. Uh, we can go all over the spectrum and we can talk about nonpartisan voter registration and voter education and certainly citizenship, but also speak from a more political angle. And I would be remiss if I don't ask if there are any activities that Mi Familia Vota is doing as it relates to redistricting. I know many, many moons ago, the census was where I began some of my organizing back in 1998, trying to get Latinos to participate in the 2000 census. So let me ask you, because we've done a lot of organizing to get folks to show up to the hearings in Texas. And certainly it's going to be a long road in this new scheme by Donald Trump and the GOP to try to gerrymander districts to their advantage. So, is there anything that Mi Familia Vota is doing in that space? And again, it's about collaboration. How can we perhaps work together there?
No, it's a very important point, which it goes to how do we make a better democracy, a more representative democracy, not the opposite. And as a nation, we have been moving sometimes into making this a better democracy. We have structural problems as a democracy. We started as a democracy only white men voting. And some people, the Trumpers of the world, the MAGA of the world, want to go back to those days where most communities don't have the right to vote. So there are a lot of trampas. There are a lot of things that they do to make sure that we are excluded from the democratic process or just make it hard. Intimidation, voter suppression, misinformation, etc. And and the issue that you mentioned in Texas of redistricting, they can take 5 or 6 districts away from, again, without using political elements, but it's away from the Latino community is the one that is going to be mostly affected. That means that it's alignment with policy issues or how we vote, etc. They just place systems on how they draw the maps, so they are safer with, in this case, Republican voters. And it's very, very worrisome because at a time when we're focusing on fighting next year on the midterms, fighting extremism, again, is that's the most important thing right now, fighting extremism. And what is extremism right now? The Republican Party represents extremism. There are no internal movements fighting Donald Trump. There are no internal movements in the Republican Party fighting the big ugly bill that you mentioned. There are no movements saying, you know what, this is not who we are as a party. So they decided to embrace the MAGA movement, and that makes them an extremist party in the nation and the history of the nation. And that's the reality right now. And it's about policy issues and policy priorities for everybody, but in this case, for our community. And the Republican Party gets an F when it comes to policy issues and policy priorities. A total F, and not only an F, a warning side. If we issue economy, health, immigration, etc., they're not aligned with our community. So when they're trying to move districts like in Texas to be aligned with an extremist agenda, is very worrisome, and we're going to fight that. We have a big operation in Texas. We have our state director, Diana Razo, over there, or heads of campaigns and problem. Angelica Razo is from Texas and has been fighting on this issue for a while. She was also in some of, both of them were in some of the strategic spaces and conversations there. But we're going to fight. We need to fight in every one of these attacks, because if we want to protect our democracy, the center of our democracy is civic participation. If you work on education, if you work on health, if you work on immigration, everything has to have a, a civic participation and a democracy component. It's about politics. And we have seen how this extremist group that is in the White House right now is trying to take everything away. And we cannot wait until they destroy our democracy.
Absolutely. And I will say that's the reason why many of us got involved in politics in the first place. It's because we understand the impact that it has in everyday people's lives. And sometimes it's difficult to understand when people say, "Oh, I don't get involved in politics. It doesn't it's not something that matters to me. It's not something that affects me." We have to educate on that as well, particularly with young people. And I think more and more young people are realizing what an impact the political process has on their everyday lives, from whether they're able to take out student loans to go to medical school, or whether they can walk down the street in a safe environment. If the gun issue has brought a lot of young people to the table, because we have a lot of unnecessary gun violence in our country. And so it's important to really keep honing in on all those issues as we continue to engage our community in a real way. And I'm excited to be working with you on this new project with AI tools, as well as continuing to work on the ground, because at the end of the day, field is always king. So thank you so much, Hector, for joining us. I know we can keep talking longer. I appreciate those who've joined, those who'll be watching at home, and we continue to do the work, because our democracy is at stake, and we cannot sit this one out.
No,
Thank you
thank you.
again.
Thank you, Catherine and Latino Victory, and to all of those watching. We're going to keep circulating this. All of us in Mi Familia Vota, we're going to keep launching a lot of these tools for everybody. We're going to share this with our sister organizations like you, Latino Victory, Catherine, and others, to make sure that everybody takes advantage of artificial intelligence and technology to fight extremism and to have a stronger political power in this democracy.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.